Light fills our world so completely that we barely question how it became possible. The LED bulbs in homes, the bright pixels in phone screens, the sharp displays in televisions, all of these depend on a breakthrough that nearly never happened. For decades, scientists could make red, green, and yellow LEDs, but blue remained out of reach. It was more than a missing color, it was the missing key to unlocking white light, high-resolution displays, and efficient lighting. Without blue LEDs, modern illumination as we know it would not exist. Blue light is demanding. It requires far more energy than red or green light, and the semiconductor materials available throughout much of the 20th century simply could not handle those energy requirements. Semiconductors emit light when electrons fall across an energy gap called the band gap. The size of this band gap determines the color. A small band gap gives red, a medium band gap gives green. But to produce blue, the band gap must be extremely wide. Silicon and other traditional semiconductors were nowhere close. Their energy structure could not support blue emission no matter how engineers modified them. You can visualize the problem like this. Generating red light is like stepping down from a small ledge. Easy, simple, low energy. But generating blue light is more like jumping off the roof of a building. The energy difference is so large that most materials crack, distort, or refuse to emit light at all. This is why early researchers believed blue LEDs might be fundamentally impossible with existing semiconductor physics. They needed a material with a wide band gap, one capable of surviving the intense energy transitions required for blue emission. On paper, one material looked promising: gallium nitride. GaN had the right band gap, good stability, and strong theoretical efficiency. But when scientists attempted to grow it into usable crystals, everything went wrong. GaN refused to form perfect layers. It developed millions of defects per square centimeter, enough to destroy electron flow and kill any chance of light emission. Worse, it cracked due to internal strain. Engineers described it as one of the most uncooperative materials ever studied. The core issue was lattice mismatch. To grow a semiconductor crystal, you must place it on a substrate with nearly identical atomic spacing. But no such substrate existed for GaN. Sapphire was the closest option, yet its lattice structure differed dramatically, far beyond the threshold that could be tolerated. The GaN crystal, forced into a shape that did not fit, tore itself apart with dislocations. These dislocations acted like microscopic traps that swallowed electrons and prevented light from forming. The result was a dim, unstable, and unreliable material that could not support real devices. Researchers tried again and again. They experimented with different temperatures, thicknesses, and growth rates. They switched to alternative materials such as zinc selenide, hoping for easier fabrication. Those efforts also collapsed. ZNS degraded rapidly under electrical stress and reacted with impurities, making it far too fragile. After decades of stalled progress, entire companies shut down their blue LED research programs. Some scientists publicly stated that blue LEDs might be unattainable with the known semiconductor families. The field was losing hope. Breakthroughs often emerge when a problem is re-examined from a new angle. In the case of GaN, the turning point came from adding a buffer layer. Instead of trying to grow GaN directly on sapphire, where the forces tearing the crystal apart were overwhelming, researchers inserted a thin intermediate layer grown at low temperature. This layer softened the mismatch, acting like a cushion between the substrate and the GaN crystal. With this shock-absorbing foundation in place, GaN could finally grow more smoothly. Suddenly, what had been impossible for decades became achievable. However, solving the crystal problem did not mean the battle was over. To make an LED, engineers also needed to create p-type GaN, material with electron vacancies. This required doping GaN with magnesium. But when researchers added magnesium, nothing worked. The material did not behave like p-type at all. It acted like an insulator. The doping was failing in a way no one understood. Years passed without a solution. The mystery eventually unraveled. Hydrogen atoms introduced during the crystal growth process were binding with magnesium, forming complexes that neutralized the dopants. The magnesium was present, but it was tied up chemically and unable to create charge carriers. The solution was surprisingly elegant. By blasting the material with high-energy electrons or by heating it carefully, engineers could break the hydrogen bonds and activate the magnesium. Once this issue was solved, true p-type GaN became possible. With a stable growth method, reduced defects, and active doping, engineers finally produced practical blue LEDs in the early 1990s. These devices were dramatically brighter and more efficient than any earlier attempts. More importantly, combining blue LEDs with phosphor coatings produced white LEDs. This opened the door to energy-efficient lighting for homes, offices, and cities. Displays became sharper. Electronic devices shrank. New technologies like Blu-ray storage emerged. A single breakthrough cascaded into countless innovations. Looking back, the difficulty of creating the blue LED becomes clear. The problem was not a single obstacle, but a chain of interlocking challenges. Material mismatch, crystal defects, doping failures, and fundamental limitations in semiconductor physics. Each issue required a new solution, and none of the solutions were obvious. But persistent exploration and a willingness to test unconventional ideas eventually succeeded where decades of traditional approaches had failed. The story of the blue LED reminds us that some inventions hide behind layers of complexity that only appear simple once the breakthrough occurs. Today, blue light beams effortlessly from millions of devices, but its existence reflects one of the most intricate and hard-won successes in modern engineering. And as we continue pushing technological limits toward faster computing, new energy sources, and advanced materials, the lesson remains the same. Progress often depends on solving the problems no one else wants to touch. The journey toward a functional blue LED also reshaped how scientists think about material science itself. Before this challenge, many believed that semiconductor development followed relatively predictable pathways. Refine a crystal, adjust the dopants, tweak the geometry, improve efficiency. But the blue LED problem refused to fit into this comfortable framework. Instead, it forced researchers to confront the reality that certain technologies demand materials that do not yet exist in practical form. GaN was known for decades, but its unusability meant that the world effectively lacked the right semiconductor for blue emission. This was not a matter of polishing a known process, but inventing methods for coaxing a hostile material into cooperation. When GaN growth finally stabilized through the use of buffer layers, the scientific community gained a new appreciation for how strain, lattice constants, and subtle mismatches dictate the fate of entire technological fields. The reduction of crystal dislocations by several orders of magnitude was not merely an improvement. It was the moment GaN transitioned from a laboratory curiosity into a viable industrial material. Before that, the defect densities were so high that electrons had no chance of recombining to emit blue light. Defects acted like thieves, silently capturing charge carriers the moment they appeared. Reducing these defects was equivalent to restoring an entire ecosystem of electrons that had previously been lost to structural chaos. But even with better crystals, the doping challenge remained, and this problem highlighted another key lesson. Sometimes the barrier to progress is an unseen microscopic detail. Hydrogen was not initially considered a villain. In many semiconductor growth techniques, hydrogen is simply part of the environment. But in GaN, hydrogen formed molecular complexes that sabotaged the electrical properties of the magnesium dopants. The dopants were present, measurable, and precisely placed, yet completely dormant. For years, researchers blamed growth techniques, impurities, or equipment. Only later did careful analysis reveal that the culprit was hydrogen invisibly neutralizing the p-type behavior. Solving this required a shift in thinking, recognizing that activation might require post-processing steps that earlier materials never needed. This was not a simple fix, but a conceptual expansion of what it means to create a semiconductor. Once GaN-based blue LEDs became reliable, the world quickly realized their potential. Metals and incandescent filaments, which once dominated lighting, were far less efficient. Traditional bulbs convert most of their energy into heat rather than light. Fluorescent lamps were an improvement, but they contained toxic materials, had shorter lifetimes, and were difficult to recycle. By contrast, LEDs offered longevity, efficiency, and safety. But none of this could scale until blue LEDs existed because white light requires either a mix of red, green, and blue emissions or a blue LED paired with a phosphor coating that converts part of the blue light into a broad spectrum. Without blue, white lighting was simply unattainable in LED form. The impact of solving the blue LED challenge can be seen in global energy statistics. LED lighting significantly reduces electricity consumption worldwide, lowering both energy costs and carbon emissions. Residential and commercial buildings have gradually replaced incandescent and fluorescent bulbs with LED alternatives. Streetlights have transitioned to LED systems, offering improved visibility and dramatically reduced maintenance. Industrial facilities now run lighting systems that last tens of thousands of hours. All of this traces back to the moment GaN crystals finally behaved. A tiny semiconductor opened an enormous doorway. Displays also changed. Early screens based on LCD technology required a bright, consistent backlight. Before blue LEDs, the options were bulky fluorescent tubes that limited screen size and caused uneven illumination. Blue LEDs made compact, high-brightness, energy-efficient backlighting possible. This enabled thinner screens, richer colors, and portable devices that could run longer on battery power. Eventually, LED-based display technologies evolved into OLED and micro-LED systems, pushing color accuracy and brightness even further. The ripple effects were enormous, touching everything from smartphones to stadium screens. Another unexpected consequence of the blue LED breakthrough was the development of blue and violet semiconductor lasers. These short-wavelength lasers can store far more data than red lasers. That is why optical media formats using blue lasers, most notably Blu-ray, were able to pack significantly more information into the same physical disk size. The tighter the wavelength, the smaller the data pits that can be etched and read. Without a stable blue emitter, high-density optical storage would have stalled.
At earlier generations. The blue LED story is also a remarkable example of how scientific credit and recognition evolve. The breakthrough involved more than laboratory brilliance. It required persistence in the face of global skepticism. For decades, researchers who continued working with GaN were swimming against the scientific current. Funding was limited, interest was declining, and many influential figures in the semiconductor world believed GaN had no future. Continuing to pursue such an unpopular material required an unusual combination of technical insight and stubborn determination. In retrospect, the world now understands that the people who solved GaN growth and doping accomplished something comparable to inventing a new class of materials. As blue LEDs entered mass production, engineers refined every part of the manufacturing process. Crystal growth became more consistent. Buffer layers were optimized. Doping techniques were standardized. Device structures became more efficient. Quantum well designs, thin layers of GaN-based alloys sandwiched between other materials, allowed electrons and holes to recombine more efficiently, producing brighter light. Improvements in thermal management helped LEDs maintain stability even under high current. Over time, luminous efficiency skyrocketed. Early devices produced only a few lumens per watt. Modern LEDs can exceed hundreds of lumens per watt, outperforming nearly every traditional light source. All of this progress rests on the foundation built by solving those first impossible problems. Without the breakthroughs in GaN growth and doping, none of the modern refinements would matter. The field required a seed, a working device that proved blue LEDs were not only possible but practical. Once that seed existed, innovation accelerated. Manufacturers invested heavily. Researchers explored new material alloys, such as indium gallium nitride, to tune emission wavelengths. Production scaled from laboratories to factories. Costs dropped year after year. As LED technology matured, entirely new industries emerged, from high-efficiency lighting to advanced display engineering.
Understanding the full complexity behind blue LED development helps reveal why the achievement is often compared to other major 20th century scientific breakthroughs. It merged physics, chemistry, material science, and engineering into a single challenge. It required insights into crystal structure, quantum mechanics, chemical bonding, thermal dynamics, and device architecture. Few technologies demand mastery across so many domains simultaneously. That is why the blue LED is celebrated not just as a device, but as a symbol of multidisciplinary innovation. Today, blue LEDs are so common that they disappear into the background of everyday life. They glow inside indicator lights, power buttons, routers, chargers, and appliances. They form the basis for white LED bulbs lighting homes. They drive the color blue in billions of pixels across digital displays. The struggle to create them has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by their ubiquity. But the difficulty of the invention remains one of the great reminders that behind every familiar object lies a story of scientists pushing boundaries until the impossible becomes ordinary.
One of the most fascinating aspects of the blue LED journey is how the solution required thinking beyond traditional semiconductor intuition. Earlier LED materials behaved predictably. Grow a crystal, introduce dopants, form a junction, and light emerges. But GaN defied expectations at every step. It demonstrated that wide bandgap semiconductors operate under different rules, with stronger bond energies, unusual impurity behaviors, and complex defect profiles. To work with GaN effectively, researchers had to develop processing techniques that were not just adjustments of existing methods, but entirely new approaches built from first principles. This becomes especially clear when examining how the buffer layer changed everything. Prior to its introduction, scientists believed the only path forward was to find a perfect substrate match for GaN. Since none existed, they assumed the problem was insurmountable. But the buffer layer challenged the assumption that substrate matching must be exact. By inserting a thin, low-temperature intermediary layer, researchers created a gradual transition between the sapphire substrate and the GaN crystal. This allowed the material to relax, reducing internal strain and lowering defect densities by magnitudes. The idea did not eliminate mismatch, it worked around it. This mindset shift was just as important as the technique itself. In many ways, the buffer layer highlighted a deeper truth about scientific innovation. Breakthroughs often emerge when someone questions the constraints that everyone else has accepted without challenge. Instead of trying endlessly to force GaN into a perfect lattice, the breakthrough came from accepting imperfection and designing a method that could accommodate it. This insight has since informed the development of many other wide bandgap materials used in power electronics, ultraviolet LEDs, and high-temperature devices. The success of GaN became a template for engineering difficult semiconductors across the industry. Once high-quality GaN became possible, researchers turned their attention back to doping, the second impossible problem. The hydrogen-magnesium complex puzzle is an excellent reminder that microscopic chemistry can derail macroscopic engineering. Hydrogen is typically harmless in semiconductor fabrication, sometimes even useful. But in GaN, it became a silent saboteur. It neutralized magnesium dopants by forming electrically inactive complexes. This meant that p-type GaN existed only in theory until someone discovered that these complexes could be broken by electron irradiation or thermal annealing. The key insight was recognizing that the dopants were present, just not activated. Activation transformed the material. It allowed the formation of p-n junctions capable of supporting high currents and efficient electron-hole recombination. For the first time, engineers could design devices where electrons and holes actually met in a region clean enough to emit bright blue light. This intersection zone, often enhanced using quantum wells, became the heart of the blue LED. By confining electrons and holes to a narrow region, quantum wells increased the probability of recombination and boosted brightness. This was another example of innovation layered on top of innovation. GaN growth enabled doping activation, which enabled junction formation, which enabled quantum well engineering, which enabled high-efficiency devices. As researchers refined these layers, they discovered another powerful tool, indium. By alloying GaN with indium to form indium gallium nitride, the emission wavelength could be tuned across a wide spectrum, from violet to green.
This tuning ability allowed engineers to optimize LEDs for specific applications, balance efficiency, and improve color rendering. The combination of GaN and InGaN created one of the most versatile material systems in modern electronics. Without the breakthroughs in GaN crystal growth, none of these alloy-based devices would exist. Blue LEDs also accelerated advances in thermal engineering. Wide bandgap semiconductors can handle high operating temperatures, but they also generate heat when driven at high power. Early devices struggled with thermal runaway, where increasing temperature caused reduced efficiency, which required higher current, which produced even more heat. Engineers developed new packaging materials, heat-spreading structures, and efficient layouts to keep LEDs stable during prolonged operation. These improvements eventually enabled high-power LEDs used in automotive headlights, projectors, stadium lighting, and industrial illumination. As the technology grew more efficient, the world began phasing out incandescent bulbs. Incandescent filaments are essentially tiny heaters that emit a small percentage of their energy as light. In contrast, LEDs convert most of their energy into visible light, resulting in dramatic energy savings. Studies on global electricity usage show that LED adoption has already prevented the release of hundreds of millions of tons of carbon emissions. Every time a city replaces its streetlights with LEDs, it cuts energy consumption significantly while improving brightness and lifespan. This environmental impact is one of the most meaningful outcomes of solving the blue LED challenge. The transformative effect extended beyond lighting and displays. Blue and violet lasers found applications in medicine, data storage, high-precision measurement, and emerging quantum technologies. Shorter wavelengths provide tighter focusing, enabling more accurate cutting tools for medical procedures and manufacturing. In scientific instruments, blue and ultraviolet sources allow high-resolution spectroscopy that can reveal details invisible to longer wavelengths. The influence of the blue LED extended far beyond the semiconductor community, touching fields that had little connection to the original invention. From an industrial perspective, the development of GaN LEDs created a new ecosystem of companies specializing in materials, substrates, epitaxy equipment, and device fabrication. The economic impact has been enormous, with LED lighting becoming a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Factories mass-produce epitaxial wafers with astonishing precision, growing complex multi-layer quantum well structures only a few nanometers thick. Once unimaginable, this manufacturing scale created a virtuous cycle. Larger production lowered costs, lower costs increased adoption, and increased adoption fueled further research and competition. The story also serves as a reminder that not all scientific revolutions emerge from well-funded institutions. Some of the most critical breakthroughs in GaN technology emerged from researchers who persisted even when mainstream consensus dismissed their work. Their determination reshaped the direction of multiple industries. It demonstrates that transformative innovation often depends on individuals willing to trust their insight over common opinion. History shows that major discoveries frequently begin with ideas that seem eccentric or impractical, until they succeed. Blue LEDs followed exactly this pattern. Today, engineers continue to refine GaN-based technologies. Micro-LED displays push the limits of brightness, color accuracy, and efficiency by using millions of microscopic GaN-based emitters. Power electronics now use GaN transistors for fast switching, low losses, and compact designs, especially in chargers and high-frequency systems. These advancements are direct descendants of the early breakthroughs in GaN crystal control. Even cutting-edge research into ultraviolet LEDs for sterilization, water purification, and biological sensing builds on the same fundamental material knowledge gained from solving the blue LED problem decades ago. In the broader narrative of scientific progress, the blue LED stands as a striking example of how one invention can simultaneously be microscopic and monumental. The device itself is tiny, fragile, and almost invisible inside the technologies it powers. Yet its creation required new theories, new techniques, and an expanded understanding of what materials are capable of. It reshaped our relationship with energy, information, color, and display technology. It is a reminder that some of humanity's most impactful breakthroughs do not arrive loudly. They begin as faint blue points of light that refuse to go out.
As we explore the ripple effects created by the blue LED, another important aspect emerges: the psychological barrier that slowed progress for decades. Scientific communities often develop shared assumptions about which materials are promising and which are hopeless. These assumptions can become so deeply rooted that they blind researchers to alternative paths. Gallium nitride was labeled as too difficult, too unpredictable, and too defective to ever serve in real devices. Funding agencies were hesitant to support research on it. Publications were scarce. Laboratories preferred to allocate resources to materials that seemed more manageable. This inertia is common in science, not because researchers lack imagination, but because data and past failures can create a sense of inevitability around what is possible. The breakthrough in GaN forced the scientific world to re-evaluate how quickly collective assumptions can shift once a single success contradicts decades of discouraging evidence. This shift in perception influenced how industries evaluate emerging materials today. Wide bandgap semiconductors like GaN and SiC for power electronics, diamond for high thermal applications, and complex oxides for next-generation sensors are now explored with more openness and humility. The blue LED story demonstrated that a material dismissed as impractical can become foundational once someone discovers the right technique to control it. This mindset encourages modern researchers to continue probing unconventional compounds, especially those with extraordinary physical properties that might revolutionize future technologies. The unexpected twist is that the blue LED did not merely enable new devices, it redefined how engineers think about solid-state lighting. Before LEDs matured, lighting was dominated by sources that relied on heating materials or exciting gases. These methods were inherently inefficient. LEDs broke the pattern by offering lighting devices based on electron-hole recombination rather than thermal or gas discharge mechanisms. The efficiency gains were revolutionary. When white LEDs entered consumer markets, the cost per lumen dropped year after year, making energy-efficient lighting accessible to households worldwide. Industrial planners began factoring LED longevity into infrastructure designs. Architects used LEDs to create lighting effects that were impossible with older technologies. The blue LED did not just solve an engineering problem, it reshaped the aesthetics and economics of illumination. Consider also how deeply our daily routines have been influenced by technologies that depend directly on blue LEDs. Every smartphone uses blue LED-based backlighting or blue-emitting pixels. Modern televisions rely on miniature blue LED arrays to produce vivid colors. Laptop displays, smartwatches, digital billboards, traffic lights, and countless small indicators are illuminated by blue or white LEDs. Even automotive lighting systems rely on high-power LEDs derived from the GaN breakthroughs of the 1990s. When people think about innovation in consumer electronics, they often highlight faster processors or new battery chemistries. But much of our visual experience depends on the dependable glow of a microscopic diode. The journey to create that diode also revealed something profound about materials under extreme conditions. Wide bandgap semiconductors, like GaN, possess strong atomic bonds that allow them to operate under high electric fields and elevated temperatures. This makes them ideal not only for LEDs, but also for power devices used in high-efficiency chargers, electric vehicles, renewable energy inverters, and radio frequency communication systems. These fields benefit indirectly from the decades spent mastering GaN growth. The techniques originally developed for blue LEDs were adapted to produce GaN transistors capable of switching at high frequencies with minimal energy loss. This cross-pollination of technology shows how breakthroughs in one area can accelerate progress in entirely different domains. The field of quantum technologies is another surprising beneficiary. Blue and ultraviolet LEDs enable precise atom trapping, optical cooling, and high-resolution imaging used in experimental physics. Their stability and compactness make them ideal for portable instruments that once required bulky gas lasers.
Researchers exploring quantum communication and sensing have integrated GaN-based emitters into prototypes that rely on stable short-wavelength light. The blue LED's legacy extends even into these frontier fields, influencing experiments and devices that aim to define the next era of scientific discovery. This broader view highlights why the development of the blue LED is often described as a triumph of persistence over discouragement. Much brilliant scientists walked away from the problem after years of failure. Some believed they had reached the fundamental limits of what semiconductor
fabricators could do. Others concluded that GaN was unworkable because every attempt introduced defects, cracks, or conductivity failures. But progress does not always come from the straightforward path. Breakthroughs often emerge when someone questions a long-held assumption or revisits an abandoned idea with fresh insight. In the case of the blue LED, success came from refusing to accept that the material was beyond redemption. Another compelling lesson from the blue LED story is how small details can determine the fate of entire technologies. The buffer layer, only a fraction of a micron thick, changed everything. The detection of hydrogen-magnesium complexes, barely visible even under the most advanced microscopes, unlocked the ability to dope GaN properly. The controlled introduction of indium, measured atom by atom, expanded the color range and improved efficiency. Each of these details represented a precise adjustment at the atomic scale, yet they collectively transformed global lighting, energy consumption, and digital displays. It is a reminder that engineering breakthroughs are often found not in bold strokes, but in the relentless refinement of microscopic structures. Even today, researchers continue exploring what GaN can become. Advances in nanostructures allow engineers to grow GaN in shapes like nanowires, pyramids, and thin films that can manipulate light in new ways. Micro-LED displays, which use millions of tiny GaN emitters, promise exceptional brightness and efficiency for next-generation screens. Deep ultraviolet LEDs, based on aluminum gallium nitride, are being developed for water purification systems capable of destroying pathogens without chemicals. All of this is part of a technological lineage that began with solving the problems of blue emission. The story is ongoing, with each new generation of devices built on the foundation created by those early breakthroughs. Reflecting on the scale of the impact, it becomes clear that the creation of the blue LED represents far more than a scientific milestone. It is a case study in perseverance, creativity, and the search for hidden solutions. It shows that the frontier of technology often lies not in the materials we use, but in how we learn to control them. The blue LED was hard to make because the universe did not provide a convenient path. Researchers had to carve one out atom by atom. Today, its light reaches across cities, screens, and devices, a constant reminder that even the smallest inventions can illuminate the world in ways we never expected.
The full significance of the blue LED becomes even clearer when we examine how it reshaped our expectations for energy technology. Before LEDs became widespread, most homes and businesses relied on incandescent and fluorescent lighting. These systems consumed vast amounts of electricity, and global energy models assumed that lighting demand would continue to grow in parallel with population and economic expansion. The introduction of white LEDs, made possible by blue emission, dramatically changed these projections. Energy economists revised long-term forecasts to account for major efficiency gains. Nations created incentive programs to accelerate LED adoption, recognizing that these small devices could reduce strain on energy grids and limit the need for new power plants. Such a profound change emerged from a single semiconductor device, reinforcing how technological breakthroughs can ripple outward into environmental policy, energy planning, and industrial modernization. For consumers, the shift was equally transformative. LED bulbs last tens of thousands of hours, sometimes decades, reducing the burden of replacements and lowering long-term costs. Their durability allows them to operate in environments where older technologies struggled: cold temperatures, vibration-heavy locations, and enclosed fixtures. Designers embraced LEDs because they could create lighting strips, panels, and compact bulbs that were impossible with filaments or gas tubes. This design freedom reshaped architecture and interior lighting, enabling softer glows, more precise color control, and creative illumination patterns used in everything from museums to sports arenas. Beyond their immediate applications, blue LEDs represent a philosophical shift in how we think about the boundaries of material science. They demonstrate that materials once considered impossible can become cornerstones of new technologies through persistence and re-examination. The idea that a stubborn crystal could unlock entire industries reminds us that innovation does not always follow a predictable path. Sometimes the key is not discovering a new material, but discovering a new way to use it. Gallium nitride was never a mystery, it was simply misunderstood and mishandled by conventional techniques. Once scientists cracked its code, an avalanche of progress followed. In this sense, the blue LED exemplifies the power of rethinking assumptions. Researchers once believed that lattice matching had to be nearly perfect, that doping failures implied incorrect materials rather than unseen interactions, and that decades of disappointing results indicated fundamental impossibility. Every one of these assumptions turned out to be a barrier erected not by nature but by interpretation. The moment those interpretations shifted, progress accelerated. This is not just a lesson for semiconductor physics, it is a lesson for any field where persistent challenges may hide behind inherited beliefs. The story also resonates because it reflects the universal struggles of scientific work: uncertainty, failure, iteration, and the slow accumulation of insight. It highlights the value of observing anomalies instead of discarding them, of questioning models when they fail to explain real behavior, and of staying open to unconventional ideas. The hydrogen-magnesium complexes, for example, were initially an inconvenient puzzle. Only later did researchers realize these complexes were the missing piece in activating p-type GaN. In hindsight, the solution seems simple: break the hydrogen bonds. But simple solutions often hide behind years of unnoticed details and misinterpreted data. Blue LEDs remind us that breakthroughs rarely arrive fully formed. They emerge from countless small realizations building toward a clear result. What makes the blue LED particularly compelling is that it affects the lives of nearly every person on the planet. Its light illuminates billions of homes. Its wavelengths power displays that define modern entertainment, communication, and creativity. Its efficiency reduces global energy consumption. Its development sparked innovations across engineering, physics, material science, and manufacturing. And all of it began with a color that refused to cooperate for more than 30 decades. When we consider the enormous impact of this technology, it becomes easier to appreciate the importance of scientific persistence. Many challenges today, advanced batteries, fusion power, quantum computing, room temperature superconductors, appear to sit behind walls of difficulty just as intimidating as the blue LED once did. History shows that these walls may not be permanent. They may simply require the right insight, the right experiment, or the right person willing to try again when others walk away. The blue LED is proof that the most stubborn problems can become the most transformative successes. So the next time a bright screen lights up or a cool white bulb glows, above your desk, remember the decades of invisible struggle behind that simple, steady blue light. It is not just a color, it is a symbol of scientific creativity, persistence, and the belief that even the hardest challenges can eventually be solved. In the end, the blue LED stands as one of the most astonishing achievements of modern engineering, a small device that changed the world by refusing to remain impossible.